Thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. If you have any type of brick and mortar locations with brands you represent, then I hope that you realize how incredibly important being highly visible is with, say, a top map pack listing or even ranking on the first page. And if you don't, then you're failing the brand or agency that you represent. Pages 2 and beyond of the search engines are where ads and businesses go to die a slow death. And if you ever thought the world was flat, think of pages 2, 3, 4, and so on as the cliff and jump-off point. Jason Barrett is the CEO at Go Local Interactive and a subject matter expert in online location-based marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss strategies for how to best localize your marketing everywhere from managing your local listings to social proofing to bid optimizations to tagging imagery and more. So let's tune in to a local expert and a local shark on a podcast near me on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Thank you so much, Jason, for being on A Shark's Perspective today. Really excited to talk to you about local and everything we can do as marketers and as advertisers to help localize businesses perform better. But if you would kind of start off and tell me a little bit about your background, what made you want to become a subject matter expert in this, part of marketing.
Okay, yeah. Well, first, let me tell you, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm excited for the opportunity to have the conversation. Specifically with the question you asked, I got into this career through the way of IT, believe it or not. And I came out of college with an undergrad in IT, more or less, and went to work for a company called Koch Industries right at the Y2K, the year 2000, time frame. And so what I did there was really focused around, a lot of different things. But one big element of that was website creation. And so I spent a lot of time building a lot of websites. And as I started to develop those websites, it became very apparent that no matter how cool those websites were, I needed to have something about that website draw attention to it, so that we could get visitors, so that we could get traffic. And I spent a lot of time working on, SEO, as a matter of fact, and that's really where it started. So I actually started a website called Kansas City SEO, and that's when I really dug into that topic, and I got picked up by a traditional agency out of New York. They called me and wanted me to more or less change careers and go that route. And that's kind of when I left the IT world behind and shifted over into marketing. And it was through that agency, their name was T&P Directional Marketing. It was through that agency that I really got into the localized aspect of online marketing. They worked traditionally with companies across the U.S., in yellow page placement of all things. And so the yellow page aspect lent itself to obviously localization. And the whole point of that particular agency was, how do we get our clients to be found locally? And a long time ago, the answer was yellow pages. And it's not that it's not today, but my task was to help transition that spend online. And so that's really where I jumped off into the localization piece of online marketing. So kind of a circuitous path, but that's how I got here.
Yeah, and you were talking about Coke, that little tiny privately held company. Yeah.
The very tiny second largest company in the U.S. Actually,
second largest, behind Cargill's. I think it's the second largest privately held company.
Yeah.
But I think I read where it was going to be like, if it were public, it would be the 17th largest company in the country. So not a bad place to get your footing. So when you think about local first, I know there's 5,000 different topics that, the 1,000 points of light that point to local. But when you look at local, a lot of people think about it from a local listing perspective only. So that's one topic, but we'll dive into it. But talk a little bit about getting into local listings. Let's walk us through how to manage that process, because that's one of the biggest pieces that people need to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. So local listings are actually, in my opinion, it's crawl, walk, run type strategy with the local marketing piece. And this is really like the blocking and tackling, the crawling piece of it. So what you're referring to here specifically are your Google listings, your listings in Apple, your listings in Yelp, that sort of thing. And the way that the world works with those local listings is it's four different ways that you can get that data in there. The first piece of it really started with data aggregation companies, and I'm sorry to circle back to Yellow Pages again, but back when the world was mostly ruled by the Yellow Pages, there were companies like Info Group, Axiom, and a company called Local Ease, which is now owned by Newstar. They would aggregate that location data, put it into big databases, and then they would offer that for sale. And what they would do when they sold it was generally sell it to you or me for mailing lists and things like that. Well, what happens, or what did happen when the internet came along, companies like Google and Apple and Yelp, they needed these these pieces of location information, and that was the place to go look for it. So that is really the root of that location information online. A lot of people, they go out and they correct their data on Google, or they'll correct it on Apple, and then next thing you know, they hit refresh or check it again a week later, and everything's wrong, and they can't figure out why that is, and it's because they haven't corrected the data at the ultimate source. As sad as it is, that still serves as like one of the main sources of data for locations, as we sit today. So the second piece of it is directly feeding it to these particular entities. So you can go straight to Google and go to Google My Business, and you can upload all of your location data. So if you're a bigger company and you have hundreds or thousands of locations, that's the way to push that data in there as well. So I call it building up signal strength. So when somebody like Google gets the same data that they've also received from one of the data aggregation companies, then there's a level of trust that is developed, and they know that they can trust that data, and they can rank it accordingly and show it on their particular platforms. The third piece is, you would have location finders on your particular website. So those companies like Google will crawl the web and they will self-discover that data, and then they pull it back into their website, and so they're all the time crawling old Chamber of Commerce sites. They're crawling any networking sites, city websites, any kind of directory website, and they pull that data back in and add it to what they've received from the aggregation companies, what they've seen received directly from you, the business owner, and then that crawling aspect. Then the fourth piece is just consumer driven. So you or I, we could go out and say, hey, there's a business here. I don't see it in your database, Google, but this is a coffee shop. It's at this corner, or it's at 123 Main, and it's user generated. So any of those four ways, that's how that location data gets in there. And I know that's a really long answer, but that's how that gets there. And then what you do with it once it's there is a whole other ball game.
Yeah, no, but it's absolutely crucial. So, where people are looking now, since most people don't know what a Yellow Pages book is. When you look at the search engines, I even find myself, especially, sort of a timely feature. I know Google Maps was the sixth highest downloaded app of all time, just released. But because of the search engines, I even find myself putting in near me, or local, widget companies. So what are some of the search terms that people marketers should be optimizing from a paid search standpoint, just from a paid search standpoint for location?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, we look at paid search or search. You kind of go to search and then getting in front of it from a paid perspective. So searchers will tend to use terms like near me. They will use zip codes. They will use cities. They will use suburbs. And in really any way they define their area. Like we have an area in Kansas City called the Crossroads. But, if you look that up online, I can just simply say Crossroads and then, a bank, ask for a bank or a movie theater, whatever that might be, and it'll show up. I will also tell you that's called explicitly stated search intent. So I've explicitly stated a location, and I've explicitly uh, indicated that I'm looking for something near me. Now I don't have to use the term near me, and I also don't have to use my geo qualified terms. There's what's called an implicit search that's conducted by users that Google knows where you are. I know that sounds a little big brotherish, but they know where you are. They know what you mean. They know which particular search terms tend to be localized anyway. And so if I looked, for example, for a movie theater, they know I'm probably looking for one near me. Or if I'm looking for a pizza shop, I'm less likely to see one in your neck of the woods when I'm sitting here in Kansas City. So they're going to show me that local set of results because they know that that's probably what I'm looking for. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
So, what types of results have you had with geofencing from an advertising standpoint? Have you seen success by localizing that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So geofencing by itself is a really neat technology, and it's fairly new. I won't say it's brand new, but it's fairly new, and it's escaped the view of a lot of advertisers. But the concept is that it's very easy to know where you are, and I think I used an example earlier as we were discussing. But again, I'm from Kansas City, and we have the Chiefs here. And if I'm a business, it's very difficult for me to advertise on TV during the Chiefs game. That's very expensive. And it would also be very expensive for me to put my ads on a billboard, inside of the Chiefs stadium. But what I can do is I can literally circle that facility, which is called Arrowhead Stadium, and tell the ad software that anybody that's inside of that geo circle, that stadium, that I want to show my particular ad in an app or in a on a website. If the website has ads showing, that I want to show my app when they're inside that fence, inside of this certain time frame. So I can literally advertise during the Chiefs game, and never have had their permission. So it's very cool technology. We have some companies that do it. It's usually geared around sporting events. So we've had some people do it with hockey games. We've had a company do it during a big conference that came to Chicago. They were looking for job candidates, and they were looking for companies that were looking for job candidates. And it's worked very, very well, and primarily because there aren't a whole lot of people that know that it exists, and it's super, what's the word? It's very, very optimized. It's set up to do well just because it's very relevant for where I am and when I'm in that particular location.
So, is it still, though, a challenge to find, when you're in Kansas City, is it still a challenge to find football near me, considering how bad the Chiefs have been over the last few years? And I say that even with trying not to laugh, considering how bad my Cowboys have been for the last, I don't want to talk about it, many years. But I had to throw that one in.
There's an exciting running back down there, isn't there?
There is one, and he has some fun near him wherever he is. So let's go on a little bit of a search treasure hunt and talk map packs, which is that buried treasure seems to be changing a lot with Google's whims. But how do I get in the top 3 listings on a map pack listing on search results? What are some of the components that go into that?
Man, so I mentioned earlier the signal strength. So if I'm an advertiser, I really, really want to make sure that I have that data out there and it's very, very clean. There's not anywhere that I could look and find any kind of any one of those data points that might differ from what I want it to be. So if my address is 123 Main Street, I don't want to find 123 Main Road, or I don't want to see anything that varies. And so one of the best things to do, like I mentioned, is get your data to the data aggregation companies. That's not very expensive to do, especially for a large company. It's very inexpensive, even for an individual, believe it or not. Then I would want to go into Google My Business, because I'm assuming we're talking Google here, and I would want to make sure that they have my data from me as well, that I've set up that Google My Business listing, and I have gone out and claimed it which means that the way Google does that is they will send you either a postcard or they will call the exact phone number that you put in for your listing. So if you put in the phone number, and they call it and you don't answer, then they can assume that that's not a real phone number for anything. But you claim that listing, you verify your ownership, and then you go out there and you need to enhance the listing with photos, with additional information, hours of operation, anything like that that you can think. They give you so many data fields that most people don't touch. And so that's just kind of a completeness of the listing. You know it's there, it's accurate, it's enhanced, it's complete, and then from that point, what really sets you apart in the rankings, it kind of leads to how close are you to that particular searcher, how relevant are you to that particular searcher. There's some pieces of it that come from the ratings and reviews, the activity on the listing, that sort of thing. So there's really a lot that goes into it. They're even now checking to see how often you log into that particular Google My Business dashboard to update your data.
Well, and talk a little bit about the importance of being, listed in those top three. I mean, everybody from a search wants to be in one of the top 3 ads, and organically you want to be on the first page, or else you know, businesses, content and companies go to die on the second page. But I mean, talk about the value, especially when you look at just having those top listings on a map pack, because I don't know that I've ever looked. I don't know that I've ever looked and decided I need to look that much further beyond the first 3 or 3 listings.
So what I tell most advertisers when I sit in front of them is think about how you search. Do you ever find yourself going to the second page? And and I'll circle back to how this affects the map pack in a second. But 92% of the search activity happens on that first page. Nobody goes to the second page. And what we assume is that I have searched wrong. Not that Google has given me the wrong answer, but it must be my fault. Let me try again, And so nobody goes to that second page. And so the first page becomes super important. And then to be at the top of that is unbelievably important. And the reason is, that's where everybody stops. Very, very few people scroll down. We actually run Google Tag Manager and monitor scroll depth and a lot of things on the websites. It's amazing how, I hate to call people lazy, but they just don't get much further down the page than what we would call above the fold. And with Google now putting the map and the map listings at the top, there goes your organic listings. They're way down the page. So organic kind of becomes those map listings. And when you look at it from a mobile perspective, which more than half of traffic out there is mobile, the map is almost everything that there is from a local perspective. And that's why I mentioned it should be first. And a lot of people spend so much time focused on their website, focused on, let's say videos and doing all the flashy stuff. And you forget that really it all starts at the local level, at that location that shows in the map. And to give you an idea of how important that is, this is a dated report, okay? So it would even be more important now, but it was probably, I don't know how many years ago, but we have an advertiser that we work with that measured the results of their local listings, and this particular advertiser was spending $50,000 a month in paid media. And when they tracked the results of paid media versus their local listings, they were actually getting 3 times the amount of traffic and leads through their local listings than they were their paid media. So their local listings were effectively generating $150,000 worth of value to their company per month, and they were paying $50,000 for the additional paid media piece.
Wow!
So it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's just that can scale up. So then let's talk about another component that I know is part of it, but reviews are again an important part of the mix. Especially when you consider that companies like Yelp have a page for every location. That's another part of the verification process. But how do reviews and really sort of that social proof as well play into the local aspect?
Yeah. So ratings and reviews are really important. I mean, people look for that all the time. Again, if you think about how you use that information yourself, yourself, if you're looking for a particular business, your eye always goes to the stars and then the particular reviews that back up the rating. And the reason is because we all are looking for some validation, some social proof around why it is that we should or shouldn't utilize this business. And so, you see a lot of companies right now spending a lot of time, at least to ask for ratings and reviews from their clients. And, the search engines are very aware of companies that are gaming that system. You can't just go out and upload a bunch of ratings and reviews. You can't offshore that, to where they're not real. They know what real ratings and reviews look like. They know the timing of them. They know the general, how many of them are positive, neutral, and negative. They know what's normal. And so about the best thing to do and about the only thing you can do is just request those reviews from people as they interact with you. And so it's really important to do. If you don't do it, then you start to look like either an orphaned listing or maybe a listing that's out of place. And you've seen them. I've seen them. You go out and you look for something. It's never been rated, never been reviewed, and you start to go, is this real? Is this a real business? And if I go there, am I going to end up in a warehouse district or is this an actual restaurant?
Right.
And so, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's happened over and over again. So to me, it just validates, again, that social proof piece of influence that we need for those listings.
So then, at least from a social perspective, and I know there's a lot of different points of view on this, but what's your point of view on a company? I mean, obviously, if you're an individual owner and you've got a Facebook page, that's one thing. But if you're a large company that has, either branches or satellite locations or franchises, and they all want their own local presence on social platforms, on one hand, that might be great from an SEO point of view, as it helps build that digital ecosystem. But, it's a nightmare for a larger marketing department trying to contain that type of content. But at least just from, say technically from a Facebook perspective, I use that as an example. Is it just dependent, your point of view, is it just dependent on whether or not that location lives alone for the most part as its own business when it should receive its own, social profile?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, Kenneth. And the reason I say that is because we hear this all the time. That's super relevant. And I'll tell you that the answer is it just depends. And unfortunately, that's the answer. But when a particular location has its own personality and has its own unique, individualism, I guess, that is when it's probably good to have your own social space. But if you are part of a large company where the messaging has to be controlled, I'm thinking of finance and banking, where there is so much regulation around what you can say, how you say that, who you say it to. You really have to lock that down, And so if you try to localize your messaging, it kind of sounds robotic, And they have done, some of those companies have done some work with, setting almost guideposts. And as long as you stay inside of it, you can have your own, messaging. But in those types of organizations, it's generally better to centralize it. I would say, like I said, if you do have something unique about a particular location, then you absolutely ought to have your own Facebook page. But what happens is, what we see a lot is it really kind of falls, I don't want to say falls apart, but it becomes very difficult with franchises and with agents and things like that. Think about like financial services, and maybe I'm an advisor and I'd really like to have my own page. It's really hard to corral everybody at that point, and you don't know if people are going off of your branding guidelines or staying within your, regulatory limits and all of that. So it can become tough.
When you're looking at specifically your website and you think about, from an SEO perspective, what are some of the things that people can do high level from an SEO perspective to really help the SERPs and things that the website can do to localize your business?
Yeah, sure. So it's very similar to what Google's doing with their local listings. So I would tell you that a business should have a location page for every single location, and a lot of the businesses fall down here, where they will just have one page that literally lists the addresses for every location. So I am Jason Barrett Companies, and these are my 50 locations in one page, and that's not good. So what we'd like to see them do is one page per location, an image, hours of operation that are unique, phone number that's unique. I could have an overview of that particular location and say it's right off of this highway, right next to the Home Depot. That sort of thing is important. And then I would say, Kenneth, that you need to really understand how people search in your particular area that you're serving, and make sure that you are targeting that type of keyword phrasing on that material. So when you develop that content, you really want to understand how people search in that area.
So how can blogs, you mentioned content, how can blogs
Yep.
in particular also help elevate your position in the ranking?
Yeah. So as you develop that blog content, it comes down to that keyword research again, and understanding that particular area, and see where your content has holes. If I'm working on a particular city like Kansas City, I've got a general content piece that's on the urban area, but I haven't hit the suburbs yet, then I could really start focusing on those suburbs where I have a presence, and building out that particular content, understanding how people refer to it and how they search for my business in that area. And so every single one of those locations could have its own blog post. It could have anything that's going on event-wise. It could have anything that has changed from the business perspective. Anything that a user might find useful, it becomes a good blog post. But you always hang it off of a location.
What other types of content should be used for helping localize a brand specifically on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think imagery. I think video. Those types of things can really be built out, not just text, but built out for a particular location. So we've really pushed our clients lately toward video. What does that particular location actually look like? Can I see a tour of it? Who would I meet if I went inside? What does it look like inside? The imagery piece, image search is huge, and that includes on the local level. So if I'm looking for a particular location, I may actually flip over to the image tab on Google, in which case, you can't have your images named DSC dot, whatever dot, JPG. It would be much better to name those images with the location, the keyword that we're targeting. The alt text ought to be based on that particular image keyword target. Everything about that image, we want to help support the ranking of that location. So I think the two pieces that you might have been referring to in that question would be, image and video content.
No, I'm with you on video as well, because that's another thing too that can serve as a piece of crawlable content, especially as you can transcribe podcasts and videos, and then you have a page with a dedicated page with that video.
That's right.
You put on there, say the video's about Kansas City barbecue, and you've
That's
got
right.
a direct linking opportunity to that as well. So let alone
That's
how
right.
somebody would find it if they went to Google and looked up Kansas City barbecue, even though it's the lesser of barbecues compared to Memphis barbecue, but that's another story. Who are some of the companies that you've seen do local exceptionally well? Who are the best practitioners out there? So we can look at examples.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple names, and I'll keep my answer short. But I would look at AMC Theaters. They do a really good job with not only their local listings, but then localizing their content on their website. From a financial perspective, you can take a look at Bank of America. Their listings are really neat. They keep them very updated. They have a good location finder on their website. There are companies like that do a really good job of having all of their bases covered, and then servicing those customers, those prospects at that local level. But those are two that I would look at first, would be AMC Theaters and Bank of America.
Well, this is one of those topics that I love because, you think about certain other types of technology in marketing, for example, that we may go to a specialist on, but people sometimes think they can handle, local listings. And as we've already covered, there's a lot more that we need to cover. You could go, a mile deep easily on this subject. So, Jason, thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective today. And, if somebody wants to find out more about you guys and how to get in touch with you so that they can optimize their local listings to the best, tell us where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find us at golocalinteractive.com. So it's GOLOCAL, golocalinteractive.com. That's the website. It's got information there to get in touch with us, and I believe there's even an inquiry form on there as well. And that's probably the best way to find us. And let me say, I really appreciate you having me on. This was a whole lot of fun, and I enjoyed doing it. And thank you as well. So.
Absolutely, you're more than welcome. Thank you for being on A Shark's Perspective.
Yep, thank you, Kenneth.
So there was my conversation with Jason Barrett, the CEO at Go Local Interactive and a subject matter expert in online location-based marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from that conversation. First, how important is local? Just think about how you search. Do you ever find yourself even going to the second page? A massive majority of the search traffic and activity on Google, for example, happens on the first page. Optimizing in order to end up on the first page or within the top 3 of a map pack listing is one of the most important things that you can do as a marketer in order for a business to succeed. Second, optimizing your local presence includes a lot of components that must work together. A lot of companies do this task poorly and their businesses suffer. Remember to spend time on location data, local listings, contact information on the website, ratings and review listings, content on a blog, tag media, social, and so much more that needs to work together. Each of these components should be optimized. Third, with the data points you have that call out your address, whether it's on your website or a GMB listing or anywhere else, make certain that there is no variance in that data. You would think that would be easy, but there are a huge number of examples where that information is incomplete and or inaccurate. Got a question? Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. So it's time to go local with a podcast near me and you. And in the immortal words of Tracy Morgan, live every week like it's Shark Week. Go do some good things and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.